Colorado.
I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Nice, man. What led you
Yeah.
there?
A couple things. I moved out here for a job. Uh, I um, I got really drawn to the idea of the place though from a guy named Ken Wilber.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I love Ken Wilber.
yeah, me too. And so he was from kind of the Boulder area, and I became basically. So, have you ever heard of a guy named Rob Bresney?
No.
Well, Rob Bresney is a he writes horoscopes. Love you, baby. um, he writes horoscopes, and so the name of his horoscope service is called Free Will Astrology, which is kind of fun. It just like immediately, uh, plays on the concept of astrology, sort of like outlining your destiny. So his is free will astrology. In other words, he's trying to use like concepts of astrology to awaken dormant potentials that you might have. And he doesn't see it conflicting at all with notions like free will. And in fact, one of the great responses that he has to people who sort of discredit astrology is he says, well, in the same way that we understand that clocks can tell time but don't cause it, we can use the rhythms and placement of celestial bodies to lead us towards insights about our lives, but they don't necessarily create like specific outcomes for our lives. It's a really great way to put it. And he had a I would get into his work and think of it, and he talks about this thing called pronoia. So he defines pronoia as the opposite of, or the sneaking suspicion that life is conspiring to shower you with blessings. And so he's a really kind of like a left brain kind of person in terms of a lot of those concepts, and I was drawn to them. And I became I just stumbled through his link page of links that he enjoyed, nothing kickback or anything like that. And one of them was Integral Naked, which was a list of Ken's dialogues and video chats and stuff like that. So I got really immersed into it, and immediately the first person that I heard Ken interview was the guy who's I'm gonna forget his name. He's in the movie Shallow Hal. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Jack Black?
No, not Jack Black. Anthony Robbins. You know Anthony Robbins?
But the life coach guy?
Yeah, the life coach guy.
Okay, yep. Yeah. Oh, that must have been a great interview. That must have been a great.
It was awesome. And at the time, I sort of had like I wasn't really sure of who Anthony Robbins was, but I was like, I just wanted to listen to what this guy had to say, and Ken was like an afterthought. He was just the guy asking the questions, but what I could tell right away at the very first interview, I had no idea who Ken Wilber was. Mm-hmm. I just knew right away that Anthony Robbins had a level of respect for this guy that was really sincere. Mm. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Never heard of this guy, but I began to listen to his dialogues only for the people that he interviewed. I didn't care anything for what Ken talked about because I really didn't understand it. But one day I had a really long bus trip to take, and I thought, I'm just going to take time and just read a Ken Wilber book. I'm tired. It had been like 3 years that I've been listening to this guy's podcasts and not understanding a single thing that he was saying, but he just interviewed such fascinating people. So I got on a bus, and it was a 28-hour bus ride. And by the time I was done with that bus, I got off and I had read basically the entire book at that time. And I just kicked myself for having never read this guy before. It was like, it was so revelatory for me to pick up on the details of it. Yeah.
It's kind of a timing thing too, because it's I was just talking about this with somebody yesterday on how the same teaching you can think either you don't understand it or it's not the right time for you. And then right at the right time, that teaching will take on a whole new meaning and it'll open up a lot of doors. Whereas 10 years ago or five or even 5 minutes ago, it was like, oh, I don't know, that's not for me, or whatever the mind wants to, whatever, just the timing, just like me and you right now, connecting right now, man. The
Yeah.
timing of it, it's perfect, man. Beautiful.
I think it's great. And I was talking to you earlier, but I'll mention it on stream so that we have it for posterity. But just the number of synchronicities that we share is just mind blowing to me.
Mm.
In fact, really was you, like, as a meme in a way that drew me really into In the Box, because I am very interested in Hunter Thompson. He's probably the single most influential person on my worldview, the person who I hold in the absolute highest accord.
Mm.
And yeah, I told you last night that I named my son Hunter, and so I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. This guy is like representing the image of Hunter Thompson as his persona or as his meme kind of character. I immediately was drawn in. I wanted to learn more about what this group was,
That's so
and
cool, dude. That's so awesome, man.
yeah,
Actually, it was the same with
yeah,
Dookie. Dookie was the same. As soon as he saw the avatar, he was like, "Okay, I gotta find out about this guy." He was the first person to follow me actually on Twitch, like 6 or 8 months ago, whatever.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, man, awesome, awesome.
yeah,
It's the right timing. Like when we started this, we kind of didn't. I was actually over in Chennai, about ready to jump into a meditation retreat, and it didn't work out. And then I just had this, I don't know, I guess something hit me that I needed to, it had to be bigger than just typing in and these avatars for me. Like I wanted to connect with people a little bit deeper. And we thought a podcast or some kind of thing or I was like, okay, maybe I start a podcast. I don't know. And I'm not really the type of person to do this kind of thing. I don't really throw myself out there like this. So the reason it happened was because as soon as I got home, uh, Dookie and Andres reached out, which I'd never talked to once. I'd never, besides on Twitch, we were friends on Twitch, but I didn't know these guys for anybody, right? And they reached out right when I got home and said, "Hey, we were thinking about starting a podcast. You want to be in it on it?" And I was just like, "Wait a second, man, this is too weird," because I just thought that. And then we kind of all jumped online and we were like, "All right, we're here. Now what?" And it felt like, just like I was talking about earlier, where I had to let go of what I thought it could be or what I wanted it to be and just let it flow and let what's happened going to happen without expectation. And
right,
it's
right,
been cool, man, because now, like, even though I love talking about BSB and Twitch and all that, and I love all that stuff, my actual, my heart on the non-dual teachings, Ramana, this kind of stuff is always been what gives me the most juice.
hmm,
I didn't think I was going to be talking about it on In the Box at all, but now because I've been doing some videos, it's just the right people, the right vibe is coming in, and it's amazing, man. So I'm really stoked that you for whatever reason you jumped in the box to our chat group and we started kind of figuring this stuff out. And then I put the picture of Ramana in the last video. um,
yeah,
I don't know if you know this, but the co-founder of Twitch, Randy, he I reached out to him on Twitter about a year and a half ago because I saw that his name was non-dual Randy on Twitter, and
right,
I thought non-dual, wow, okay. And so I reached out, and he'd been exposed to some of these teachings in college that really helped him, and his teacher was a devotee of Ramana, so there's some kind of connection there too, which is pretty cool. We haven't really talked on it too much, but I think that's really the Bright Star Gang, like on another level there.
yeah. And I have uh, I've had a few thoughts that I think lend themselves to some of the functionality of the blockchain in connection with the preservation. Like if you just think of lineages and the transmission of spiritual knowledge from masters to disciples. You have this like analog history of basically a blockchain. You know what I mean? It's really like that's what it is. It's
I like that.
it's
Yeah.
yeah it's I mean it's been the blockchain like just because we put it into codified it into the technical realm. The blockchain has existed since the dawn of time with what is the information that is worth trying to pass down to future generations. And like I just think of the kind of Eastern wisdom that has been sort of transcribed onto various different scrolls, etc., stuff like that. And here you have this technology, the blockchain, which totally functions really succinctly for the transmission of everyday, ordinary commerce and things like that. And that's great. And in a way, it's almost like a perfect place to kind of merge or to at least give a little push for the non-dual awareness, because it just blends itself so perfectly. And in a way, like, when we think of blockchain technology, we think of it in terms of like at least I think of it as a lay person. So I should be clear about that. The way that it gets diagrammed when you're watching a video about, the very first, any Bitcoin documentary, when they say, what is the blockchain? And they show you that, well, you get this block, and then there's always the line, and then there's another block, and then there's another line, and then there's another block. But the one thing is that it's linear. It's definitely going in a straight line. And that's kind of how we conceive of it. But as I was thinking about it tonight, and thinking about our talks, I was thinking about it that, just because it's a chain doesn't mean it has to be a linear straight line chain. Realistically, it can be like a helix or like a DNA spiral or something like that. And in that regard too, there's the concepts of the journey from the smallest, most dense particles, like pure matter, to increasing degrees of awareness, from like single cellular organisms to multicellular organisms to et cetera, and oftentimes this chain that goes from like least conscious and most dense to most conscious and least dense gets described as a chain, because as each new wave enfolds the previous wave, just like a biological sphere depends on a material sphere for its existence, but it adds new developments for with new challenges, new new possibilities. These are like a kind of nested dolls, so to speak. Me and my wife, we were just talking about nested dolls. And in that sense, the blockchain can be conceived in such a fashion. It's a perfect marriage to some of these ideas of spirit.
I love the metaphor of like the hey brother, how are you?
Hey, what's up, Kevin?
I love the metaphor of the Genesis block, like being our source, like looking at the source of whatever it is that's the same within us, like retracing from the outermost point of a thought, an idea, a concept, or even an object. But really the closest object to us is our own thought and our own body. So retracing it from that starting point back to whatever's the same inside of us. And sometimes I use the Genesis block just to kind of get people excited. or interested in the sense of blockchain, but really just getting more familiar with whatever it is that's the same, and using the augmented or using the superficial to get us to trace back to the source of thought, or the energy that energizes the mind, or whatever it is, the most powerful place that gives everything that we think, speak, and see its power, right? uh
Right.
yeah.
And in some ways, you know, I love the I take a lot from different traditions and different uh, ways of looking at anything really. But one of the things that gets talked a lot in integral theory is the concept of the second law of thermodynamics. So the second law of thermodynamics is the law of entropy, which essentially says that things are in a state of continually breaking down. And one of the ways that you can conceive of it, and this relates to what you were talking about with the Genesis block. What you can, the way that I can picture it is basically like you have a glass full of marbles. You know what I mean? And it tips off of the edge of the table, and all of the marbles just fall on the floor. And in some ways, like, this is what the Genesis block is, right? It's like before the Genesis block, all of the marbles were in one glass, and as soon as it fell over, all of the Bitcoin, all of the all of the transactions, they all fall on the floor. And the reality is that there's no conceivable way to track and measure every single marble in every single possible way that it bounces and interacts, the gravity, the forces, etc., that pull on it. Another way to describe this is kind of like a glass of water in which you drop a single drop of blue ink. The ink goes into the water, and it's just immediately dispersed. There's no way to reconstruct the way that every single element of that ink has mixed with the water in a way that would be able to extract the water, extract the ink back into the dropper. And in some ways, like with Bitcoin, you actually have a functioning ability to do that. You have something that is able to be aware of kind of all states, of all transactions, of all processes at one time. And they describe this process, the second law of thermodynamics, as the law of entropy, the law of things breaking down. But the integral model, which looks at and in fact any model that looks at the rising of spirit, shows that there's actually a equally kind of contradictory trajectory where the model of matter is to break down into, like just like a plant breaks down into dirt. But at the same time, you have this other trajectory, which is for life to emerge, and after life emerges, for basically the creation of new orders of complexity, which seems to conflict with a primary law of the universe that says that things must break down. So in some ways it actually kind of like I as I look into the integral stuff, one of the characters that they reach out and talk about is this guy Rupert Sheldrake. Have you ever heard of Rupert Sheldrake?
No.
Well, Rupert Sheldrake gives this great TED talk, and it's one of the talks that I truly love. It ended up getting banned. It was a TEDx talk in which his talk got banned because he said the specific thing that I think made his talk kind of a red flag for the TED group was that he said that mechanistic medicine is not the only medicine that works, or he challenged the notion that mechanistic medicine is the only medicine that works. So if you have a second,
I'll
after
watch
the
that.
video, anyone
Yeah.
that's watching, check it out. Hey, Kevin, how you doing? Cheers, brother.
Yeah. Welcome, bro. How are you?
I'm doing well. I don't know if I can be heard. Hold on.
Yeah, I
You're a
can't.
little low.
Yeah, your mic's a little low.
All right. Let's see.
Um,
All right.
Sure. Well, I'll just finish that thought about Rupert Sheldrake. So basically, he wrote a book called The 10 Dogmas of Science, and one of the things that he challenged was this idea that that we have these fixed laws, like the fixed law of light. He tried to challenge the concept that the speed of light is fixed. And so he was I believe he was a researcher in the realm of biology. And so he started researching how trees develop into different trees. So like how an ash tree becomes an ash tree versus a maple tree becoming a maple tree or whatever. And so according to his research, he was saying that the what they narrowed it down to was this specific this specific I can't say exactly what it was, but some aspect of the tree's cellular nature that led it to become an ash tree. But what he was showing was that the nature, or the aspect that created the ash tree, was also present in the maple tree. Both of these trees had the same fundamental thing, so it didn't necessarily create a really great line of logic for how it could create these different trees. So he started poking around at some of the like basically things that are taken for granted in scientific research. And so as he was doing it, he said that he had he was a professor, I forget where, but he, down the hall, was the researcher that was in charge of the measure of constants in the universe. So he went down to the talk, and of course I'm doing like a little bit of a disservice to his story, but he has this conversation with the researcher about the speed of light. And basically what he says is, as he's looking at the speed of light in the 50s, he noticed that that the speed of light was changing by maybe like a couple meters, 20 meters per second or something like that. But then nevertheless, it was changing, and it was changing unanimously around the world, not just from one department. So as he confronted him about this, and the guy said, basically, like, you've stumbled upon one of the great kind of embarrassing things about our science, which is the science of the fixed laws. And he said, well, what exactly are you talking about? And he said, well, there was many people, coming up with these differing numbers, and he said, so are you trying to tell me that you were fudging the numbers? And he said, we prefer not to use the term fudging, we prefer to use intellectual phase locking. So what they were doing was basically kind of establishing with each other what their results were, and then what they did was they changed the measurement model to be, so they made the speed fixed, and then they adjusted the measurement to be a function of that fixed definition. So the speed of light could never change ever again, because if it did, the unit of measurement would change with it. And so he thought that was pretty great, that they had figured out this problem. But
I love that. I love
yeah.
that. I mean, that was a lot of information, but what I got out of it was that if every tree has something contained within it that's the same, right?
Right.
There's something that starts off that's the same. I'm trying to like use that metaphor as like for us, like we're so different in so many ways. We look different, we think different, we like different things. In general, everyone's unique. Everyone has a unique face, a unique way about them that they express themselves, right? But there's something that's the same. There's something that we resonate with that's completely the same. And unfortunately, if we notice that more, there would be no war, there would be no poverty, there'd be no starving people, there'd be no problems, because when the right hand is cut, what's the left hand do? It takes care of it. There's no thought, right, that's not my hand, I can't help that right hand, I'm just going to let it bleed, that right hand's against me. The left hand takes it and holds it and washes it and puts on the band-aid. So if more people would get in touch with the thing that's the same within them and not different, it would solve every world problem, you know? So
right,
that's amazing. And these kind of metaphors with nature is great, because a lot of people, that's how a lot of people can get in touch with that, because you can't force it. We know that you can't force that. Hey, what's up, One Love?
Hello, hello, hello.
How are you?
hey, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Real quick.
So great.
We're having
Beautiful.
a great convo. Rocky Mountain High was just saying that within every tree, even though, you want to say that again, about that particular part of it?
Yeah. So it has to do with the research of a guy named Rupert Sheldrake, who stands out as someone, a lot of times when you think about things, or when you hear ideas that that sort of present alternative information that isn't necessarily embraced by mainstream views, there's oftentimes a lot of points of failure in which that information might overlook specific specific things about the world, you know what I mean, that tend to be convenient for the narrative that alternative world is trying to present. Whereas with Rupert Sheldrake, he is a biologist. He is completely studied in the classic systems, and yet the ideas that he's proposing try to solve aspects of the universe that are sort of overlooked by a dominant worldview that embraces materialism. So we were talking about the way in which a specific sapling will grow from, two different saplings could grow, one into an ash tree and one into an oak tree. So as a researcher in this department, he studied and focused on this specific question. And what he ended up determining, and I can't recall the exact aspect within the tree's cellular makeup that informs which tree it's going to become. But what he discovered was that both trees possess basically the same root essence that somehow science was saying that this same essence in one tree was telling it to become one thing, whereas in another tree it was telling it to become a totally different thing. So he developed a field, or a philosophy around this idea of how this one single thing could tell two different things to grow in two different ways, and he calls it morphogenetics. So that's where we were at when you joined. Good to see you.
Dope.
Is my audio working at all? No?
You're in, Kevin. Yeah, we hear you loud and clear, brother.
All right, cool. Yeah, I had to fuck with it a little bit. But yeah, I just wanted to join to hear what you all have to say. Yeah.
Thanks. Feel free to jump in anytime. Same you, Trisha.
And I don't know, I kind of I caught a little bit of what you're saying. There is definitely this unifying force between people. I think between nature and people, everything. It may be that we look at other people and they're actually a different projection of ourselves. And I know I am very interested in mushrooms and all that to do with the interconnectivity underground between, you know, in different areas. You can have
That
like
mycelial network.
flushes connected all over within miles and miles and miles of space. So in that sense,
Definitely
we're
the
actually
mycelium network.
very, very connected like they are. I know y'all are on a little bit different subject, but
No. It's the same subject because we're just relating. We'll start it off with that within every tree, there's scientifically proven that there's something that's the same, even though it ends up to be different. Mushrooms, I guess you could say the same. And then we're using that metaphor for within us, there's something that doesn't change, or there's something that's the same within me as within all of you and everyone in the world, and how mushrooms don't fight, trees don't fight, and
communicate actually too. And they actually, trees and mushrooms work together to communicate underground, the mycelial network. I'm not just talking about mushrooms from a tripping aspect, you know?
Yeah, of course.
I'm thinking of it like sending signals to a tree that's 2 miles away that something is happening to this other tree, like whether it's a fungus that's destroying it or whatever. It actually protects the other parts of nature.
So retracing that within ourselves, like it's obvious to see the most the objects, but the objects, the only object that really starts is with a thought, because without a thought there is no object. So if we're aware of
manifest,
so if we're aware of our thoughts, and we're aware of our feelings, and if we're aware of our emotions, whatever it is that's aware of those things doesn't change. And you can take this from when you were 5 years old, when you were 10 years old, when you were 20 years old, when you were 25. Something hasn't changed. Now everything has changed all around. Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, what you like, what you don't like, your problems have changed, the people around you have changed. But why is it that something feels totally the same? But that can't be turned over. It can't be objectified with the mind. It's like the sun can't shine on itself, right? The sun can't turn on itself. It's what's shining. Your eyes, if you go ahead and try to look for your eyes, you can't find them. But yet they're seeing everything. Likewise, that which doesn't change within us can't be turned upon with the mind, because it's what's seen. And that's why this world's so fucked up, is because we're looking for completeness, happiness, contentment with the mind, right? Through objects, and we get a little taste of through happiness. I got this new truck, I'm happy. But what I've noticed is, I think we're only happy because we stop wanting for one moment, right? For one moment, we've attained what we've wanted, and then we don't want for a minute. Anyway, I'm starting to
tangent
on the rabbit hole, but I don't know if you guys get my drift there.
No, I completely understand. It's also kind of like saying it's kind of like putting yourself in I can't relate that to putting yourself in a position of not having anything, or it's like to not want something. I'm thinking like going down Buddhist thoughts, beliefs and stuff, but true enlightenment is like realizing that nothing matters, but everything matters. That it's a little off subject, I guess, but
well, I mean, that's it, the subject and the object now. Okay, so everything you can see, touch, hear, every feeling, this is all, in this type of talk, this is an object, including your own thoughts, right? And in your own body's even an object, right?
Yeah.
Because,
I think we're a firewall actually to many things.
And this, when I say the subject, I'm talking about that which is aware of the body, that which is aware of the thoughts, right? The subject and the object. So even though we can talk about this stuff, there can always be another view. There's no rights and wrongs here. Nobody knows, because as soon as you say you know, then there's a flip side. I don't know, right? But we're like pointing at the moon. But this kind of talk, what it's done for me, why it's thrived my life, is because it inspires me to abide. And by abiding, I mean turning my power of consciousness and my power of attention, instead of to the thoughts, feelings, emotions, back towards the source. And there's a stillness that happens that's pure contentment. And I don't know, how are you doing, Ryan? I want to let you get a word in here, ask any questions or say what's up. How you doing, brother?
Good to see everybody. Really enjoyed the show. I'm actually going to be a little quiet.
Yeah,
Got a
okay,
little one sleeping
yeah.
in the other room. So
Yeah, welcome, brother.
yeah, good to see everybody. Yeah, really enjoy the conversation. The interconnectedness of everything is something that I really vibe with, and yeah, always seeking to learn more. You know, I really do believe everything is connected, and always, you know, seeking to discover. So yeah, enjoying it. Hey, everybody.
Welcome,
Hello.
brother. Welcome.
Thank
brother.
you.
I think interconnectedness is, if I can't like jump in on any other thing that y'all mentioned before, that is one of the most important things that I do know that you're talking about right now, is the interconnectedness of everyone. And it's like, even going so far as to say, who is God? What is God? God is us. We are God. All of us combined, I think, are God. That is a belief of mine. That is just one way of thinking about things. I'm a Gemini, dude. I battle with myself all the time. People think the twins, you know, whatever they want to think. To me, and I'm not saying astrology is for real and absolute, but I'm never going to take one side. I'm never going to stick to a side of an argument if there's a better argument to be made otherwise. But my belief is that we are all connected, and God is all of us. We were created in God's image. We are all God. Put us all together, and us collectively, a collective consciousness is basically it. And that's not to put down like the Christian view of God or anybody else's religion. It's not like that. And it can actually be incorporated, in my opinion, into that with an open mind. I don't know, for whatever that's worth.
Awesome, brother. Rocky Mountain High, you wanted to say something, brother?
Oh, I just wanted to jump on the concept of what you were talking about, a little bit about the awareness, I guess. You know, especially with there being a couple different mentions to mycelial networks and interconnectedness and interconnectivity and you know, the first thought that came out of that came up for me was kind of like, you know, the connectedness, the relatedness between the two topics of you know, spores and you know, not the non-dual source. So in a way, you know, like if you just picture kind of like the emergence of kind of a you know, like a mushroom, you have like the stem and the root, you know, and then kind of like the broadening, and then kind of underneath the broadening, just if you just think of like a classic mushroom, you know, you have almost like these gills, you know, underneath the mushroom, and there's like breathing, you know, like there's a breathing that is going on with those gills, and like if I can use that as a way to talk about the awareness of objects and subjects, the best way that I can think about it is like, you know, it's the source of your awareness or your non-dual consciousness that is always ever present, that is reflecting on the things that are that you're bearing witness to, that you mistakenly kind of identify with, which causes the suffering. It's it's like that broad base. It's like the spores like kind of broadening, right? Like it's broader than your perspective. Like your non-dual awareness is beyond just what you can peripherally see, right? I mean, because like you're aware of things that are in the past, you're aware of things that aren't visual. But it doesn't mean just because they're not physical objects, that doesn't mean that you can't have a like a obsessive compulsion with them. You know, like we can understand our needs to obsess over physical things, but we can also obsess over mental constructs and concepts that we lodge in our brain. And a lot of times we do that because they lead us to a treat. Like we're like a gerbil, you know, we want to press the treat. It's like we think of ourselves as being this type of person. You know, when I was a kid, I was this type of kid. I grew up this way, and it's like a repeating narrative that gets ingrained into future interactions. I always used to say it's like you don't realize that you carry it around. It's like luggage. When you meet a new person, you're like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Can I just show you all these things that I already know about myself so that we don't have to cover this?" You know, and it's like, you know, it's like the worry to get into the non-dual space is really about this is the thing that's blocking you. You know, it's not broad enough. The thing that you're holding is not this. It's not able to extend beyond the bounds of your own perception of it. So, you know, like even how we're all talking about this, we all see it in a slightly different way. So what we're talking about is not what we're actually saying. You know what I mean? It's like, I was thinking about it almost as like, it's like we're on a surfboard. You know, we recognize that, you know, that we're on this surfboard. It's the ground on which we're able to be supported on the water of life, you know, but we're mistakenly identified with the surfer instead of the ground. You know what I mean? Does that relate?
You mean like yeah, we don't propel ourselves. We're part of something greater, something like the water is the thing that's moving.
Right. And it's a great point. You know, we don't propel ourselves. It's like waking up and on third base and thinking you hit a triple. You know what I mean? It's like we're constantly, you know, navigating these ideas that that we're responsible for our you know, our success. You know, like, oh, aren't we such great creative people? We've managed to do this or that or build a house or whatever. And it's like, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. You know what I mean? Like there's a ground and a source that has pushed us upwards, almost in like a mycelial nature, into these upper reaches where we can have debates about, you know, the nuances between different ways of looking at things. I mean, this is really far complex, like advanced neuronic, like discussions that we're having. But those, to draw it back to blockchain and stuff and the Genesis block, you know, these like really nuanced conversations that we have, they trace all the way back to the ground and the source of all creation. You know what I mean? So it's like we're taking, in a lot of ways, credit for this you know, like you know, being a part of a network that is so advanced and developed.
Yeah, I want to bring it back to one thing that Ins and Out talked about, and he said, and we all deal with this. We've all said this, like, I struggle with myself, or I don't know how you said it, but all I heard was I and self. All right, because I've said that. Oh, I can't deal with myself right now. I'm struggling with myself. We've all said that. So this kind of language can really direct us to inquire more. If I can't deal with myself, then what's the I and what's the self? All right. Now, in my experience, like like Rocky Mountain High said, we've all experienced different. I can only come from my own experience. And in my inquiry into this, the self is that which doesn't change, or no, I'm going to say the I. The I is that which doesn't change. And in this regard, the self is my personal self. Me that has the problem, me that's sad, me that's happy, me that's excited, me that wants, me that doesn't want, etc., etc. And the I that's aware of that self is that which doesn't change. So I can't deal with myself. I am happy. I am sad. I want this. I don't like that. So something, the I doesn't change. When I was 15, the I was the same. When I was 5, the I was the same. But because we've been taught to understand things, because the only way we can understand things is with the mind. But this cannot be understood with the mind, because the sun doesn't shine on itself, because the eyes can't see themselves. The seer and the seen are different. The thinker and the thoughts are different. The knower and the known are different. Right now, you might be thinking, what the fuck is this guy talking about? You might be thinking, wow, I really resonate with whatever this guy's saying. So if you agree or disagree, that doesn't matter. But to get more familiar with what's aware of the disagreement or agreement, what's aware of what likes or doesn't like, what's aware of what feels good or feels bad, turning the attention towards that, giving your love, giving your power of consciousness towards that, for me, has been pure peace. Because regardless of the ups and downs of life, regardless of whether I'm happy or sad, that's the same. That doesn't change. But because it can't be objectified by the mind, we miss it, because we're taught in our lives that the only way we can get something is to become it. And how do you become yourself? How do you become your true self? How do you become your I? You don't. You don't get it and you don't lose it. It's the only thing that's ever been the same. So because we can't get it, like I can become a doctor, I can become a lawyer, I can become a mushroom expert, I can become a blockchain expert. But how can I become myself? How can I become God? I can't, because I already am. Or that which in me that doesn't change. Not me, the person. I mean, it's a reflection of God or whatever, but I'm talking about that which doesn't change right now. I'm talking about eternal. And that's in non-dual teachings, what we talk about, or what they talk about in the true and the untruth, or the real and the unreal. So I could say none of this is real, but it's relatively real. But when they're talking about unreal, all they're saying is it's not eternal. And when they say real, all they're saying is that it is eternal, or it's always the same. So obviously, if I say none of this is real, and somebody hits me in the face, I'm gonna be like, man, that feels pretty real to me. And it is relatively, but absolutely, the absolute. So all these concepts, all these ideas are pointless unless we start turning our attention and start getting in touch with that which in ourself that doesn't change, and start walking that peace. I could say we're all one. I could say there's something within us that's all the same, but I can't do that for you, or you. I have to walk that in my life. I have to start turning my attention and start playing. I like it like a lab coat, like you're an investigator. Why wouldn't we want to investigate into this amazing experience of self and of body and of mind and of consciousness? We're so interested in attaining and getting and understanding the physics of this and that and what's going on. We don't even want to know what's going on right here. We don't want to turn it into this. And it's mind-blowing. It's they call it Maya, or the great illusion that, wow, we never. Anyway, I'll pass it on. I just wanted to throw that in there.
That was great input.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's we spend a lot of time seeking for things that you know, we're already there, right? And so you know, like a lot of times explorations will come back to the same source, right? I mean, it's sort of like there's no other way to it. Everything has to uh, uh, you know, yeah, it sort of all resolves to the one, right? The universal, you know, the one, you know, has many manifestations, many different yeah, I guess modalities are, you know, different expressions, but it all sort of, it comes back from that source, like you said, whether it be blockchain or this discussion or our life. You know, I took an interesting course in college, and you know, basically, you know, it was a theory of religion class, and it talked about like the fact that we're even in class, like talking about, you know, philosophy is predicated on, you know, like, you know, and beyond even our comprehension, like the fact that we're even here, you know, and it becomes like tautological to even, you know, think it could be differently. We're here, and so I'm just trying to tie it back to that mushroom thing, right? It's like, you know, we came from a source, and now we're out on the edges talking about, you know, these concepts, but ultimately, you know, you know, it all, you know, it has to, you know, it
Connected
all
back, right? Connected back. So
absolutely.
there's a quote that I heard that said, you know, every single one of us comes from an unbroken lineage of survival. You know, have you ever heard someone say that?
No, not that phrase, but that, I mean, that encapsulates exactly sort of what's in my head.
Yeah, I mean, if you, it's the one of the most profound things that you can possibly think about. It's like, it's true. It's like, if at any point in history, which we can at least say is billions of years old, right? If at any point any of your, you know, ancestry had failed to reproduce, you wouldn't be here. So you are literally standing here as the on the as, like, you know, what Hunter was saying, like, you know, like experiencing the real world, and like, you know, walking around in Target and being like, oh, do I want the green plates or the blue plates? You know what I mean? And it's like, you come from an unbroken lineage of survival. Do you have any idea what that means? What you trace back to? You know what I mean? And it's like, here we are thinking about, like, you know, like, which shower curtains really go well with my, you know, like, and so to touch on what Hunter's talking about, you know, like, you know, it's like, you know, had talked about my Kung Fu Sifu in the box before, but I'll mention that I had a very instructive Kung Fu teacher. Excuse me, just one sec. I need like a pillow or something like that. I'm starting to get old, you know what I mean? So I had this Kung Fu teacher, and he one time, you know, he would do all these great lectures. I don't know, have either of you guys or anyone ever heard of a landmark forum? Anyone ever familiar with that?
Yeah, landmark, totally.
Yeah, I have a good friend who has been doing it. I actually went to a seminar with him once, but it didn't stick for me. But interesting stuff. What's up?
So with landmark, you know, they have a you know, like they call it a technology, and they have like a language, which makes it pretty successful, because when you get drawn into their language, you know, it's like, I hate to, you know, like, do a disservice to their system, but it's like, when you call something like a moop and a geep and a, you know, a beep and a bloop, you know what I mean? And then you're like, the bloop connects to the bleep and the beep connects to the bloop, and all of a sudden you're like really enmeshed in, like, yeah, like I can understand that, because like you've kind of created this language around it. So how could really there be a dispute for how the language all connects to itself? You know what I mean? But you know, so this landmark forum was very influential for my Kung Fu instructor. He saw a lot of value in it, and he really taught me a lot of the concepts that it represented, but he did so within his kind of own understanding of it. And one of the things that he did was he would like draw a series of pictures, you know, like like a square connected to a triangle, connected to a circle, connected to, you know, like an octagon or whatever. And then underneath it, he'd draw the same set of symbols, and he'd be like, okay, this one up top, this is the unenlightened person going throughout their day. And I'd be like, okay, I'm following you. And he's like, okay, this one down here, this is the enlightened person going through their day. And I'm like, well, those are the same exact symbols. You know what I mean? So what are you really getting at? And he's like, the enlightened person knows that they're enlightened. I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. You know, like he had a lot of like kind of koan style, knowledge that was really influential for me at that time. But it's true. It illustrates a really good point, which is that, you know, like, you know, there's no reason why someone who's enlightened can't consider the difference between green and blue plates. It's not like, you know,
it's kind of like this. You guys see my screen?
I love that. Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like that's what it's trying to find that I that I was talking about. It's like all around, all the time, everywhere. And because we can't understand it, we think, where is it, man? And
We're immersed in it.
we're immersed.
Right. And I would venture to guess that every single person that's connected to this conversation has some grounded understanding in an experiential understanding of it. And so I'd like to ask you guys some questions, actually. You know, like, do people look at you or ask you for information relating to it? Like, I know, Hunter, you mentioned that we have a hard time finding it. Would anyone care to like share some ways in which people might look at them as an example, or try to ask questions about it, et cetera?
I know for me, you know, it comes with abiding. Like when I'm abiding in that, rather than abiding in my mind or my thoughts or my hopes or my dreams, and I'm staying in that, naturally the right people come and will be like, hey, how are you? And I'll be like, good. And they'll be like, what's going on? And I'll just be like, and just when you're content, because I feel like even though at some point the mind will dissolve as far as completely, we'll know this we'll awaken on the deepest level as far as, and it'll never change. I feel like there's a moment-to-moment opportunity to abide that doesn't require any future or any someday the story of me and my path and all that. And so I feel like the more I abide, the more the right people that are supposed to, for me too, to learn from, because I learn from everyone, show up, and the right questions get asked. And because this is my love, like I share about a lot of things as far as like, you know, in the box, we do all kinds of interviews with blockchain, and this is where my heart says yes. And so I love this kind of sharing. I don't know if you guys have listened to the talks I put out on In the Box, but even though they get the least amount of views, because it's usually most people are too busy, or because you have to sit with it. It's not something, hey, real quick, I'm in a hurry, I gotta do this. This is something that's a very deep, that's why I usually say at the beginning, if you're in a hurry or if you don't have time to sit with this, just don't do it, because this isn't something, there's no hurry here. This is about settling. It's settling into something that's already there. But in order to settle, we have to let the mind settle. We have to let the mud settle so the water can get clear again, so it can be calm again. And so yeah, I guess coming back to your question, just how this all ended up, this conversation right now, doesn't feel like it was from any of my doing. It felt like, because I've devoted my life to abiding, not every single moment, but in general, to that truth, the right people, the right circumstances, and happen, I guess. Yeah.
I have to agree with you on that. Like, not so recently. Well, I mean, I guess this Twitch and stuff is more recently what has been what's found me almost, I guess you'd say, when you're not looking for something,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
comes to you. I did have this streak, I'd say. I'm not going to get too much into my past. I haven't had a fucked up past or anything. It wasn't like horrible or anything. I made some poor choices and numb my mind for a while. I'll put it like that. But like after I got over that for the most part, there was like this 2-year period where I'd randomly run into just strangers. And I live in New Orleans and all that stuff. It happened a lot in the Quarter or like the French Quarter. And just ran, I guess, because there's so many different personalities there. It like me and the most random, different walk of life type of person would come across each other and immediately just start talking. It was a natural thing for us to, we just knew to talk to each other about our soul, what we are, how we are all connected. Those things presented themselves to me, and I knew as well as the other person who was involved in my interaction with them. We just knew, and it was like, oh look, it could be a dude, it could be a chick or whatever. It's generally at a club because I would be waiting for my wife to get off of work. She bartends downtown, so I'd be there, and yeah, the strangest of interactions that were so connected, and there's no other feeling. You get a certain feeling when that happens. You just know. I've never been saved. Jesus and all that stuff, and people say they know and all that stuff. But this is one of those things where I just know these encounters. These weren't coincidences. Like they were meant to be, to put me on, to keep me believing in a certain thing, to keep me on a certain path, which has led me here, which is furthering my path, which I also think is happening at the same time of the evolution of the consciousness of the world right now is being extremely accelerated too, because of what are we doing right now? We're on a Zoom conversation with people around the world, which happened before the coronavirus. Not to get into the coronavirus, there's already enough of that out there, but something allowed for people from everywhere to connect to and find each other that wouldn't have just naturally like come across you walking through a park or a mall or in the French Quarter or whatever. So I don't know.
Is one
It
love
naturally
story? I like her little thing she put up there. Maybe she's just listening.
Yeah,
But,
I was
that's
just about
cool.
to say that.
Yeah,
The little
really
rune.
really nice message.
Yeah, so I really appreciated what both Inside Out and Hunter, you both said. Like, there's sort of a synchronicity that you kind of experience, just from time to time, and certain people, and kind of bringing it back to the surfboard analogy. It's like, you got to put the board in the water, and then the waves come, and not everything is a wave, but like, like when you've caught one, when the water is swelling, and you're accelerated, and I think like thing I'm really tuned into is the notion of abiding. You have to be present, and if you get locked into, I'm a software developer, and thinking about things from a logical perspective, you look, you get an algorithm stuck in your head, or instead of like mechanics, and you get locked into the logic, and almost inherently you leave yourself, and you start speaking in this like dumbed down language, and then that's it's the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law, and always trying to tune back to that spirit, and to to that present moment, instead of leaving, and like you mentioned, like the Coens, and talking it, in symbology, and stuff like that. Well, symbols are a very low resolution expression of of the truth that they are trying to describe, right? And so I really appreciate both of y'all takes on it, and Rocky Mountain High as well earlier on. and this is really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, inside out. Yeah, I'm a software developer, a coder.
I'd like to talk to you later, actually, if you don't, separate and aside from this talk, whenever you
Oh.
have a second, because I'm working on playing with the SDK and all that stuff. And
Oh, for Twitch?
yeah,
Awesome.
I don't know. We can talk about it.
Ryan, are you user 1363?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll give you a follow right now. It's awesome to meet you, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
And
cool.
I can be really long-winded and hardly get my point across, so sometimes I apologize for that sometimes.
That's great.
It's
Likewise.
just my stream of thought can be fragmented sometimes.
That's how we get
one
clear.
thing
Likewise.
One thing that came to my mind a little bit as each of you were discussing your own relationships with that, that endeavor, is the concept of a harmonic in a musical string, you know what I mean, with a guitar. Especially I just got senses in each one of your answers, the way in which this kind of stuff represents a kind of a harmonic release. For you, Ryan, it was the harmonic release of allowing like the low resolution notions that you need to fixate on as part of your work, like run off of the sides like a water off a duck's back, like it's sort of like in a way like an absence, you know what I mean, like they describe I was sharing a video with Hunter earlier where it was a video by Father Thomas Keating, and he said, it's not the absence, it's the fullness of everything. So as you sort of unplug from some of what you are focused on, that naturally has to be very draining to you. It's like a opening outward into emptiness that has no definition and no use case, you know what I mean, except for just not being cluttered with the low resolution stuff that you have to focus on all the time. With you, Kevin, I heard a lot of the resolution and the harmony that comes from experiencing yourself in a unique situation that I guess going with the flow, you know what I mean? I sort of not to put words in your mouth, but I imagine that there have been times in your life when you've sort of restricted yourself consciously, like purposefully withdrawn yourself, and so you're releasing into the communion with the strangers that you're meeting in New Orleans and stuff like that is an expression of that harmonic for you that sort of vibrates like, the one thing about a harmonic, like if you pluck a guitar string, you'll get this beautiful resonant tone. But if you pluck a harmonic, it's like God plucked the harmonic tone. It's like, that tone it seemingly just goes on forever, and it represents something that is definitely just outside of the bounds that you're confined to and constrained and constrained within. And so I feel like you're like releasing into the communion with other people, and Twetch, and the in the box being representations of that is like you're sort of making up for previous times when you've like purposefully withdrawn yourself. It's the exact opposite. It's the being willing to go down the water slide wherever it goes, you know what I mean? The twists and the turns. And then for Hunter, like just the abiding that you were talking about, it's the the recognition that the opportunity for this peace and this joy, this abundant joy, is not fixated or associated or tied with anything whatsoever. That, you know, like, going back to a little bit of the integral stuff, when I first got really into integral, I got really into this guy named Fred Kaufman. And he talked about, he was Argentinian, and he's brilliant. I think he works with LinkedIn now. He's like one of their, you know, the chief kind of like envisioner of the brand philosophy or something like that. But back then he was, you know, he was tied to the Integral Network, and he was sharing this, especially the, you know, at being that he was Argentinian, there was a specific story that he told where children were abducted from Argentina, and it was something that everyone kind of knew about, and yet there was really nothing that they could do about it. And the mothers would go out into the streets and just be crying and protesting, and the entire nation was kind of gripped with like the suffering that these people were kind of dealing with. And so he came with this very like personal approach to response to suffering, the way in which it had directly impacted his country. And so he used the analogy of like you know, the most atrocious suffering that you could possibly think of. And so I believe he was talking about being in a concentration camp or something of that nature. And he was saying essentially that you have the ability, there's no reason why, even in the worst circumstances, you cannot experience the fullness of joy and light. And he talked about it as being something called responsibility. And so he broke it down as the words responsibility, the ability to respond, you know what I mean? And so you can put someone in a situation that makes them feel like they're subhuman, like they're less than anything, they deserve misery, and you can try to force them to feel that way, but they always have the responsibility, the ability to just receive, and to you know, to be not divorced from their own recognition of their grace, no matter who tries to turn them into to like twist them into something that is reprehensible. And
don't
so
they
for
talk
you,
that into, don't they talk that about that in Landmark about or responding instead of reacting? Like if your initial reaction inside is like before you react, you can tune in with that and then respond. So the initial reaction might not be a choice, but that responsibility to respond. I love that, man. That's great. Responsibility.
yeah. And it returns power to yourself, you know, and I get that from you, Hunter, that is primary. And in some ways, like I almost again, like I kind of put words in Kevin's mouth, so I'll put some words in my assumption about you, Hunter. Like in some ways, I wonder if you kind of almost think of it as like almost like a game. Like to use the surfboard analogy, it's like you try and stay standing in the grace and the presence. It's like you almost want to see like a big gust of wind try to knock you off, because you're like, no, like it's like in a way it's like the Karate Kid, you know, like you're training yourself to have that, you know, like that moment of just like, you know, like calm and peace. That
yeah, well, I guess I've learned that the hardships or the thoughts that are believed that make you sad or make you whatever, those, I used to think of those as obstacles, and now I think of them as blessings, because Ramana taught me to trace thought to the source of thought, and through self-inquiry and deep meditation in the silence, the inquiry takes whatever believed thought that's making you happy, sad, whatever, and flips it, because you're shining a light on the truth. The mind can't answer the question, who am I? If you're answering that question with the mind, then you're not going deep enough into the question. But in the depths of meditation, this question turns over any thought, shines the light of awareness, and you're left in abidance of the self, or the silence of the self. And so whereas I used to avoid thought, try to make a fight with it, try to overcome it, or problems, now as it comes, I look at it clearly. It's like Osho once said, if somebody's holding, if they're holding, if they think they're holding jewels, they think they're holding gold, right? I won't, and they're really holding rocks. I won't tell them they're holding rocks. I'll say, look closer. Take a close look for yourself. And once they see for themselves that they're holding meaningless stones instead of gold, they'll drop it themselves. You know, that's shining the light of awareness. So sometimes I look at like mantra and concentration practice where you're covering over. It's good. It's a good practice. But for me, what's worked is getting to the root of the problem, right? So yeah, that's a thank you for bringing that up though, because it's true. When I'm in my best place, I'm trying to utilize hardships to go deeper as blessings. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think one of the words that I like is skillful means. You know, it's the you know, it's in a way it's kind of knowing when, like you know, like Kenny Rogers said, you know when to hold them and when to fold them, right? Is that what he said? You know,
You gotta know when to hold them.
Right. But in fact, I saw a meme that was on that was going around that was like, man, Kenny Rogers going out in the middle of this COVID-19 shit was the ultimate know when to fold them. You know, like, but yeah, like, you know, like I guess it's skillful means, right? Like in some ways there's a lot of things that inhibit us as human beings, like the Maya that you were talking about, like the like our day-to-day tasks, our responsibilities that we have to like constantly focus on. And I guess you know, like there's you know, like the ability to have that abidance is in a way the ability to use those opportunities for like knocking you off your platform. If you think about like the Karate Kid, like, you know, when it comes into you to try to knock you off, it's the ability to kind of know when to hold them and when to fold them. There's times when paying attention to the ordinary things are completely reasonable. You know what I mean? You don't have to be kind of like wandering around like you know, looking for the butterflies in the universe at all times. You know what I mean? But the problems that come along can be skillfully navigated in ways that you kind of you grab them, you know, like to wrestle with them, to hold them, but you don't carry them, and you don't bring them to the next problem. You need to know when to hold them and when to let them go. And that's actually one of our functions as like higher evolved beings. Not that we're, you know, evolved in any necessarily like you know, like extraordinary way, like necessarily like Ramana Maharshi might be, but even just as being able to have complex language systems and things like that. Like I saw a video the other day, which was a gentleman that there was a sea turtle that was like, you know, hovering around at the bank of a river, and this gentleman climbed down the bank. It was pretty steep terrain with lots of rocks and stuff like that. It looked dangerous. Made it all the way, and I'm watching the video thinking like, what is going on? What is he doing? Like, is he going to go down and try and pet this sea turtle or something like that? And then all of a sudden he reached into a crevasse and he pulled out this baby sea turtle and like threw it on into like right behind its mother. other or whatever, and the turtles just floated by. But it's like that. It's skillful means, right? Like we have the ability to sort of navigate the challenges of life in a way that is in service to those feelings of harmony, those accordances that we are feeling. But we don't have to just like cast everything out of our lives that doesn't, you know, like strictly fit that purity of self. We can carry the purity of self, I think, that we've uncovered through our own skillful means, and use it to relate things to others, like what you were saying, kind of about you know, the people that come to you in your day, and you know, hello, how's it going here? You got Andres coming back.
What's up, brother?
But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on that? I'm curious.
I'll relate it to Andres because real quick, because we met randomly and we become really, really tight through this in the box thing. And we have so many things that we kind of like, we on the surface, we don't quite see eye to eye, but it totally doesn't matter because there's a love that's deeper than that, you know? And so anyway, that's kind of like what we've been talking about the whole time, is that love that unites us all, that the trees might be different, the mushrooms might be different, but underneath the surface, there's a sameness that we're trying to tune into. So I want Ryan to say something, but I just wanted to say that real quick because Andres jumped in.
Yeah,
Love you,
what's
brother.
up? Welcome. Hey,
What up?
enjoying the show. It's very cool.
I was actually thinking of you, Hunter. I'm eating some peanuts over here. They're probably they're not Costco, they're BJ's.
I just wanted to comment on what Hunter was talking about the guy who was holding rocks, but he thought they were gold, and you know, the advice to look closer. Number one, I could have used that, you know, today. You know, kind of got out of myself a bit and got a little hamstrung. But you know, when I'm working with others, you know, it's I have a tendency to be like, oh, I've seen that problem here, go about it. And you know, it makes me realize that you're actually robbing somebody from the opportunity from discovery, right? You know, that's how, you can't teach anybody anything. Like you can only like create conditions for people to learn themselves. And you know, especially like, you know, in my day-to-day job, like you know, I work with folks, and you know, I have a lot to learn from other people, and I have an opportunity to teach others, and you know, or see, even that word, right? I'm not teaching others, I'm working with others, and they're learning along with me. And so anyway, I really like that, where it's like you can't be like, oh no, like obviously that's you know, those are just rocks, right? Like yeah, it stings, you know, to hear that, right? What you want to do is like, oh, look closer, and then it transforms that moment, that energy, into something that like is it's transformative for the whole, like it's holistically transformative, instead of just like, you know, for me it's energetically cheaper just to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you know that's a it's like a local optimization. What you really want is that holistic transformation, that harmony, you know, coming back to the harmonics, right? You don't get, you know, harmony by just plucking another string like randomly. It's like, oh, play that G. Well, maybe that's not the right chord. You need to find the you know, one that kind of fits with the overall. So I really appreciated that.
It's kind of like
Yeah,
tasting honey yourself and then trying to explain what honey tastes like. And you're like, oh, it's really sticky and it's sweet and it's like got this texture. And people are like, that means nothing to me. But then they taste it and they say, ah, I'll get it now. And that's as a, when we're like, I can see you in work when you're working with somebody, instead of saying, hey, do it like this. It's almost like a child. You don't tell a child not to do something. You give them alternatives. What about this? And what about this? And what about this? Yeah, I like that, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think the child aspect is, you know, really great point. You know, like I'm a parent. I know that Ryan, you're a parent as well, and it really is. You know, like when my first child was born, His name is Hunter, as you know. But when he was born, I turned to the nurse and I looked at her and I said, so this child has no context for understanding anything. And she looked at me like I had just kind of like said the strangest thing in the world. And she said, yeah. And you understand who his main source of understanding is going to be? You. And I was like, oh yeah, good point. But but with to Ryan's point, I think talking about children, especially, you know, like we can talk about enlightenment and stuff like that. Enlightenment is like education for adults, you know what I mean? But one of the easiest contexts for understanding, you know, our own path for continuing education is to understand how we talk to children, because watching children develop through their own stages to get to a point where they can, you know, logically think about things is very similar to how things that are beyond logic are waiting for our own development of complexity and self-referential you know, arguments and things to really teach us that to see the forest instead of just simply the trees. From a spiritual ground, but when it comes, you know, like I think that children are just such a great way to kind of teach, to talk about all of this type of knowledge, because it is, you know, like when you're teaching a child something, you really, I see so many times, and I don't mean to sound like I'm someone who judges other people's parenting styles or anything like that. I know that that's what I am about to do, so maybe I'll just say I'm sorry for this. But there's times when I see people like in a store or something like that, and there will be a mother that's like, stop yelling, why are you so upset? And I'm like, that's probably because you're screaming at them, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they have no context for understanding that how they are being has a huge amount to do with the like context for which the child is going to begin to think about things, because it's all a process of you know, you gotta be right before you, or you gotta be wrong before you can be right, you know what I mean? So so you need to give them the permission to be wrong. And you know, like for example, and this goes back to our conversation about source, because in a way it's understanding where the education is going. It's not going to the right answer, it's going to the brain. You know what I mean? You're not teaching them to look like looking at the moon, so to speak. You know what I mean? You're not trying to teach them to understand the Maya. You know, like you really what you got to learn through life is you got to understand exactly how much all this stuff is going to make you suffer. You know what I mean? It's like you got to teach the teaching is about pointing at how that is going to go back into their ability to process it. So you need to be on a level for what type of things are getting processed. Like when I first started with my kids, even when they were real little, when I could tell that they were looking at me, the first thing I started doing is going like this to them. You know, like I'm just showing them like, move your mouth. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you got to learn to crawl before you can walk. You know what I mean? And so when I started teaching them math, I would ask them stuff like, what's 3 plus 3? And they would be like, 11. And I'd be like, that's right. 3 plus 3 is 11. Good job. And then they're like, you know what they're like? They're like, I love math. And I'm like, yeah, math is great. You know, like, it's like, we can figure out like what 3 plus 3 is later. You know what I mean? What I don't want you to think is I'm not good at math. You know, like that's what I don't want you to think, you know? So it's like, you got to create the conditions like Ryan was talking about. You can't, you know, it's meaningless to give someone the hurrah, you know, like the grand reveal where everything suddenly dawns on them in the harmonics of the universe. You know, you have to show them that, just try and pull the string, see what happens. You know, there needs to be the permission, and for each person it's their own willingness to vibrate with that accord. You know what I mean? Like some people might vibrate it on a different level, but that doesn't mean that their vibration with it is wrong in any way. it's these ongoing processes of removing the things that are constricting that vibration in a way that allows it to more to be broader, you know.
I love what you said, dude, about how children are trying to um, learn and evolve and come into their own through understanding, and then we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. What's up, Trisha? We're
Hey, just
we're like we're it's like a cycle. We're becoming more childlike, more innocent, more not knowing, more in the moment. And so we're teaching them and they're teaching us. You notice old people, if they don't soften, like when they're in their 70s, 80s, if they don't soften and become childlike, they become so hard. Most of them become soft because the universe forces you to. But that cycle of life, and how we're hopefully becoming more childlike as we age. We're becoming more innocent, more open. If you tell a kid, I don't have any kids, but if you tell a kid, we're going to Disneyland, they'll be like, oh, let's go next week. And they'll be like, whoa, I want to go now, because there is no next week. Next week doesn't exist to them. They're in the moment, man. Who cares about next week? I want to go now.
right.
And, so that, I think you're right about that childlike innocence and that beauty that we need to learn from. And I love that analogy. Anyway, that was great. That was a great analogy. That's wonderful. What's up, Trisha? The meme goddess?
Oh, hello.
The meme goddess is in the house.
Hi there.
What's up?
The mushroom expert.
Trying to get there.
No, you are a mushroom. That makes you an expert. We were talking about that. We were going to try to have this relates into this conversation of being the mushroom instead of experiencing it, being it, and that's the same with the self. It's like we can talk about the true self or God realization or the oneness, but actually what would it be like, even just for a moment, just to be that, to experience that, and to drop the wanting of it, drop the becoming aspect of it, and to give yourself permission for one moment, even just for one moment, just to be that. I love that. So
Where's the ears? Where's
Trisha,
the
Oh, I
hat?
guess I am dropping the ball.
that was Trisha inspired. Yeah. Well,
Gotta wear the ears.
I really want to I'd like to keep doing these type of meetings, because I feel like I've gotten really inspired, and it's cool to see other people from Twitch that are like-minded in this way. And just
Is that Ryan from Twitch?
Yep.
Hey, what's up,
What's going
man?
on, brother? Nice to see the face
Yeah.
behind the user number. That's awesome.
But yeah, behind the little digital stamp.
That's why this in the box thing has been really awesome. And it
I
was
fucking love it.
it was our kind of vision of like, okay, typing's cool and becoming friends, but like there's another level of connection that's available. Even if not everybody wants to, at least we should make it available for people to jump in and get to know each other and share our truths. We all have something to teach and to learn and or show, not teach, like you said, show, to take a look a little bit closer. Hey, what would it be like to be a mushroom? Wow, I never thought of that. I can't be a mushroom for you, but I can point to it and be like, hey, try it. What's that like? So this is great. I'd like to hopefully do these spontaneous meetings more. How do you guys
Thanks
feel
for
about that?
facilitating it.
Yeah.
Totally. Really wonderful.
I'm
to connect.
surprised there's so many
Fantastic
people on here
conversation. Yeah.
with so little interruption between everybody, especially with me in here. I'm surprised I haven't rambled all over everybody. I've gotten better at that though.
Yeah, I think because I talked in the last little outside the box episode I did, I talked about listening to the silence between the words and listening to the silence between our own thoughts, and that's where the juice is. Like whatever inspiration we get through these words, the juice is going to be in the silence, whether that be now or later or whenever we have the awareness and the attention to listen to that. that's going to be where we get the real inspiration. And I feel like that's where this all comes from anyway, is that source. And so maybe that's part of it. And also I love listening to, you guys have all had amazing things to say that that I can take with me and be like, wow, I never really looked at it that way. It's nice. It's nice.
Absolutely. I did check out your the stream the other day, the silence, and I turned it on, and you know, very early on it was like, you know, if you don't have the, like, if you're not in the mood for it, or like, you know, your disclaimer, right? And I was like, not in the, like, you know,
Wasn't the right
I found
time.
myself, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch it at 1.5. Oh, never mind. No, this is not
Yeah,
the right time.
yeah.
I had to step away, but I came back to it, and it was solid. So I really
It's
appreciate it.
yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for listening to that within yourself, because our hurried society and our hurried life, it's hard to settle sometimes. And when we are ready to settle, that's the kind of the mood I want you to be in, where you're not in a hurry. Because the thing is, we take our learning of other things and that busyness in our life, and we take it towards spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, knowing the truth, or whatever it is. We try to use that same mentality with this, and it doesn't work.
Fast
And
food yoga.
fast food, yeah, I gotta get it. It's like, oh, I heard this funny rap. This guy's like, I'm so good at meditation, I can get that shit done in 5 minutes. I don't even need to sit an hour. I'm so good at that. It was a joke, but that settling in is the first step, and being okay with waiting, being okay with not knowing, being okay with not understanding, being okay with being humiliated, being okay with being the lowest, being okay with being sad, being okay with being all of it. That okayness. And there's this book that I didn't read because the title was enough. And the title was Loving What Is. And when I read that title, I was like, why should I read a whole book on it? There's no need. It's bringing that loving what is mentality into every moment. And when we do, everything changes. It's just amazing how the worst situations, we settle into really trying to love it, become like, fuck, this is amazing. This is a really amazing thing. And just a second ago, I was complaining, I got to get out of here. This is shitty, because our minds, and it's a switch. And these tiny little insights that we're giving each other here can flip a switch. Me and Rocky Mountain High were talking about before everybody came in, and that was this. It's timing. The same teaching that right now you're like, that's nothing, that's just shit, and for me that doesn't work. That's fine, but stay open, because any of these little one-liners or these tips at a certain point in your life, whether it be now or in 10 years, can flip a switch and all of a sudden open you up to stuff you never thought was possible. So that the idea is, that's not on our timing, but we just got to stay open. We got to stay open so that when the timing is right, that we're open to receive. That's all we can do, is be open. And so I hope that I can emanate that openness with all of you, so that not only I can receive what you have to give, but I can reflect that within you.
And to those ends too, especially because you mentioned, wanting to do these more. So, and I'm a big believer in intentions. So in stating intentions and things like that, I think it's really helpful, So one of the things that I would be, like, what I'm getting out of it is like supercharging, like it's like a rechargeable battery that you like, you got, my mouse uses those. So I gotta, at the end of the night, I put them in, and if I forget to do it the next day, my mouse starts fritzing while I'm trying to twitch something. And I'm like, man, wished I would have put my rechargeable batteries in, So it's like that. Like, I want to be able to like launch off of the, outside the boxes, where like, it's like when I closed that laptop lid and I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, I just got recharged, you know what I mean? And so not just to recharge from these, and to hopefully like engender the recharging of others as they're connecting in through the the spirit and stuff like that we're talking about, but also, you know, challenging each other. I think that's a big one, you know, like being there for each other, receiving each other, like making, you know, that really a big part of the broadcast is our receiving each other in the process, but also challenging each other in terms of everyone sees things slightly differently. And as, you know, like we kind of get to a point, you know, like someone else can bring up something like that challenges someone to think of it in a slightly different way, or
say bullshit.
You know, yeah, or challenges our bullshit. Yeah, you got to be able to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that those are those are healthy. You know, those are the aspects of any healthy community and relationship, is just like, you know, receive and challenge each other. You know?
Yeah, I think not taking things personally is a big step in evolving. And like for me, we talked about it earlier, that when my triggers get pushed, I see opportunity, you know.
Right.
I see a great opportunity to look not at what they're saying, but my reaction. What is this
Right.
reaction within me? What is this that's making some kind of a fuss? Because what it's saying is, look there, look under that. So I've been called out a lot in my life in men's groups and different scenarios, and I can say that the initial reaction has given me so much, because the responsibility to respond through I'll talk about this more maybe in other times, but the self-inquiry has taught me, the commitment to that practice has taught me to look instead of to react, to look at the reaction, to look at the one who's reacting, and to get to the source of that. And because from what I've seen, it isn't true. It's a ghost. When I look clearly, there's nothing there. And so naturally, there's nothing there. There's nothing to react to. But that's an internal thing. That's not something on the outside, but it's on the inside. And it's turned into bliss. Basically, it turns into just peace. It turns into appreciation for that person calling me out, or for that reaction. And so I'd like to, we can try to do it again next week at this time, and we can stay in touch over the In the Box chat. I don't know, Ryan, if you have that link, but we have a Discord chat we have a Discord channel that we stay in touch with. It's a little easier to do group chats and private messages that we can drop for you. But let's shoot.
Twitch comes out with their own.
Let's shoot for this time next week. And if something earlier comes up, I'm open to doing it again sooner, but let's at least shoot for that. And the intention anyway.
I can do that. And I also want to challenge you, Hunter, to continue, even though, you know, we have a plan to return next week to some more dialoguing, but to also challenge you to continue to make some outside the boxes on your own, because they're fabulous. And yeah,
Thank you, brother.
keep riding that wave.
Thank you, brother.
The analytics agree with manifestable. A lot of people tend to stay till the end to watch all the way to the end.
Well, when they tune in like Ryan did and know there's a time and a place, I think that can happen, because if you're tuned into what I was saying, I want to get Ryan to talk.
They're good to fall asleep
something,
too.
but the trouble with spiritual or under these kind of understanding is the mind always wants more, so it's waiting for something to get, because it's the habit of the mind to be like, okay, what's the next teaching that I'm going to grab, and it's going to make me into, and the reminder that isn't it at the beginning kind of sinks us into not knowing and into okayness with not understanding, and just it gives the vibe of settledness and that this is enough type of. Go ahead,
So that's
Ryan.
something I've been dealing with actually a lot lately. I've always known like you get that serotonin and dopamine rush like when you tell people your plans. So a lot of people when they like tell people like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do to like better myself, and then they get all jazzed and never do anything about it because you kind of already got that like reward center. But like
Yes.
yeah, definitely. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot lately is just that like when we tell ourselves these things that we're going to do something and we get all jazzed and we get that like reward center, and it's just so easy to get caught up in that moment of excitement and think you've actually accomplished something, and it's really toxic to slip into that spiral.
Yeah, I mean, it's like basic, like, like psychology 101 and the rat and the sugar, right? It's like, oh, you get a little bit of sugar, I go back, even if it's like, if you just keep going after that, right? And it's like, and then, like, you don't get that positive reward, especially as like a software developer. It's like, trained in like this technique called like test-driven development. It's like you write a failing test and you write a green test, and then it's like, every time you get a green test, you get like that pump of dopamine. It's like, oh, and then before you know it, it's like like that's what you're seeking as a again, you're tied up in the logic and the mechanics of it rather than kind of the spirit of it. And so that's definitely very close to had a big experience with that today, and just generally over my life. But being able to come back, like you mentioned several times tonight, Hunter, abide, right? Just like just I like to think, listen for the whisper of God, right? You just like you have to be silent because otherwise you won't hear it, and if you're out looking for it, it will continually elude you, or me in that case. And so all of this is really, really striking a chord.
Absolutely, because honestly, like where I was getting at is I've always kind of known that fact about like like if you're going to tell people stuff you're going to do, don't get caught up in that excitement and make sure you still follow through. But something I heard really recently that I never really thought about, and it's been on my mind a lot, is someone I follow on YouTube mentioned that he feels he was lying to himself because he had this coping mechanism of sounding smart. And I know that sounds like blatant, but like what he'll do is he has a really, really good ability to self-analyze, and I feel like I have that as well. So like I'll sit down and I'll like analyze myself and like try to understand what's going on. But then in that moment, like when you're kind of like talking to yourself or even like other friends, you kind of make yourself feel like you're doing better than you are by trying to sound like you understand what's going on. And so that in that moment of being like, oh yeah, even though I'm like doing these negative behaviors because of this, it sounds like you understand what's going on completely. And so you're just like, yep, I'm Gucci. And then it's the same thing as telling someone about a project. You almost don't do any work on it. And then you just keep lying to yourself that like, oh yeah, no, I worked on that thing years ago and I'm so much better at it now because of blah, blah, blah. And you have this really intelligent explanation as to why you feel like you've grown past it, but really you're just kind of explaining it away. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that sounds so smart. They must really know what's going on. They must be totally okay.
Yeah. And in some ways like that's a little bit reminiscent of what I'm hearing from you is like using dissociative processes where you use like skillful means, things that you've developed over the years to kind of dissociate. And I think that's really kind of the core issue is like our degree of comfortability, basically. Like, like comfortability is a it's a it's a pretty strong lure to be in your comfort zone and to kind of be in a space where you benefit from your awkwardness, you know what I mean? Like there's no other way to put it, but just growth is awkward, like because you gotta just kind of trust and go out there and you don't know where you're going to lead, you know? And so it's kind of like that dichotomy. I think what I'm hearing from you is like, you know, that's something that I get about you personally too, is like, you know, like you tend to like kind of, we were talking about Hunter, like the resonance of like his abiding and stuff like that. Like, I feel like you feel a resonance in sort of like, you're being like willing to be goofy or silly and like just
Yeah.
sort of you know, like that just makes you feel comfortable because, you know, like you it's something where you are reminding yourself that you're not too cool to like, you know, like
Exactly. Yeah.
look a little weird or something like that, or to say something funny.
And you pegged it, which is like, that's always been like, I try to look at it as a positive, but I know I've turned it into a positive because it comes from like childhood bullying, you know, your whole after school special, blah, blah, blah. But like when I was younger, they taught me to just kind of like beat the bullies to the punch, which I mean, in the time it worked, but because I was so young, I didn't really understand what I was doing. And so I got into such a habit of like speaking negatively towards myself as like self-deprecating humor, but I was internalizing it. Like it wasn't like this like nihilistic meme culture that I love, and like I love that nihilistic humor, but I recognize that it's humor, and I really try to like use it to actually build myself up versus breaking myself down. And I think the silliness also came from that as well. It was just like me being like, oh, you guys think I'm a weirdo, then I'm just friggin' weird. And now I'm trying to like embrace it and not use it as like a self-deprecating thing.
Yeah,
That's deep.
I actually wanted to mention something that I thought related a little bit to what you were talking about. So it had to do with you talking about kind of you know, setting kind of these ideas of things that you're going to do and stuff like that. And I want to draw that back into, you know, our conversation about like kind of the educating of the child and sort of where the education needs to go. You know, oftentimes we're all the time obsessed with things on the outside, you know, like it's so easy to be distracted by things that are out there somewhere, and we set our agendas based on them, etc. And there's so much value in discovering, like, you know, there's a great Ramana Maharshi quote where he said, you know, wanting to change the world without discovering one's true self is like trying to cover the world in leather to avoid the pain of walking on sticks and stones. It's just much easier to wear shoes. And like it's a great metaphor, and I think especially is true a little bit more for women, that women are a lot of times caregivers, and so they're oftentimes, at least I had a mom who was an extreme caregiver, and I think my whole kind of relationship, so maybe I'm more thinking of, you know, like women as I consider my mother to be an example of, but just she's always thinking of everyone else besides herself, you know. And so watching her do that, it showed me the way in which like just a little bit of attention towards herself could be so redeeming for her personally, instead of like the constant struggle to like, you know, like the Sisyphean effort of pushing the boulder up the hill for other people, you know. And so I wanted to use that as a metaphor to kind of describe what I think is like one of the most activating aspects of any interaction, you know, like and it has to do with listening. So it relates to, you know, like situations where you're hearing other people and stuff like that, but the listening doesn't have to be specifically to other people. It can be listening to yourself, listening to the world, listening to the river, stuff like that, listening to a mushroom. But so this is a quote from a guy named Gil Hedley from a book called Integral Anatomy on genuine listening. And he says, genuine listening requires that you willingly bear witness to what someone else needs to say while simultaneously sparing them of your own solution, defense, dismissal, alternative reality, rebuttal, counterpoint, comparable story, or more extreme example. This kind of listening is a very active part to play in a conversation. You have to believe for those moments that none of the things you might say could possibly be as valuable as hearing that person out. You might need to employ every ounce of your strength of character to actually pay attention and not butt in with your own bit. That kind of attention paid to another is a powerful medicine. And you know, it relates to the concept that it's, you know, it's about like the education is not for the other people, right? It's for yourself. It's like being selfish with like your need to kind of evolve and to grow. It's like, you know, and listening is a perfect place to let that happen, right? It lets like you kind of flicker alive as the things that you're thinking are sort of passing over you, but you're just allowing them to pass over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a great quote to start off whenever we do these kind of like talks or kind of consciousness talks or whatever. Like start off with that to remind us to tune in to that listening, because it is the habit of the mind and of the, you know, to the busyness of the mind to, and then hopefully that relates to our own life and listening to the silence between the thoughts. Because if we listen to the silence between the thoughts, the thought of I am this or I'm not that or I'm not good enough or whatever, I'm sad, they have less appeal because they don't make us feel good. What makes us feel good is listening to the space between the thoughts and or if you're going to listen to any thoughts, listen to the good ones, listen to the ones that lift you up, listen to the ones that make you feel good about yourself. And I like embracing what is, as far as, you know, we're all weird in our own little way, and it's when we try to be someone else or trying to put on a persona, that's okay, but getting in touch with this is can be an expression of whatever comes out, you know, spontaneously. You know, like it's like when you're freestyling, poetry or hip hop or whatever, like sitting here with all six of you, what's through is through. I don't know what's gonna come. I just let go and the one unfolds it. I don't know, I'm told somewhere within, I look around, there's 6, 7, you're all gonna begin with the source, you know, whatever it is. Well, when I start thinking about it, I start stumbling because I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know what's going on here. But when I let go of like, I don't know, it's this okayness with not knowing, right? And that's
Absolutely.
a big step in life. That's a big step. That was especially for a man. I mean, for a woman too, I'm sure, but I'm just saying, as a man, the ego is so big in man that it wants to know and it wants to be the best and it wants to shine, it wants to be like, look at me, I'm, you know, it's just natural man's ego, and a woman too, obviously, but I can only speak from man's perspective. And so the first time I could actually say, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what's right. I don't know anything. It became almost like my mantra at some point of like, I don't know. And somehow you can fold over and you can be like that child, or you can be like that dog or whatever that's just there. I don't know. I'm just here. And there's so much bliss in just being here. A mushroom doesn't know, right? A tree doesn't know. It just is. A frog doesn't know. It's just sitting by the bank. And yet we're trying to, really with meditation, we're trying to get to that place that we already are. And if we look at nature, it already is. A dog's just sitting there. A frog's just sitting there. A mushroom's just sitting there. A tree just is. We tune into that isness. Tune into that isness within ourselves, because there's some element of us that just is too, and just being. But we want to make it complex. No, I'm going to be something. I'm going to be something special, right? I'm going to be the best at this, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to dominate. I'm going to be on the leaderboard or whatever it is. It's all okay. But when we identify with that as being us, there's a problem, because like Ryan said, we get caught in between those highs and lows. Now I'm high, now I'm low. I got the green light, oh, I got the red light. It's no way to live. The market's up. Yeah, the market's down. I'm horrible. It's fucking crazy. It's like, how long can this isn't sustainable. This is not a sustainable way to live. But whatever the reflection you need to tune into that which is the same within you, whether it's a pet, whether it's a tree or a mushroom or a bumblebee, or whether it's a child, or whether it's your wife, or whether it doesn't matter. It's a reflection of that within you that is that, you know, and that's our connection. That's how we started off this conversation, with that connection, with that interconnectedness. And so I encourage you all and myself to learn from whatever it is, nature, your pets, your children, and try to see that which is okay within them, which is just there, which doesn't need to know. And try to tune into that in our own lives, you know, because not knowing is great. If I ever over talk it and it sound like I'm some whatever, my wife's reminding me right now, I'll just shut up. She's like, enough, dude, cut it off, cut. But so anyway, you guys get my drift.
There's never enough, Hunter.
Never enough, Hunter.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. But
thank you. Yeah. I have to run pretty quick. But,
yeah.
thank you so much. Go ahead.
No, yeah. Let's say our goodbyes, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate meeting all of you, and Kevin, I'll be in touch regarding Twitch SDK.
Cool, thanks.
One love, thank you.
Right.
Hunter, thank you.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah,
We can't wait to have you on, by the way, for something like cool or something like that. And thank you so much for doing the friend swag thing. And have you gotten your address out to us?
No, I owe you an email.
All right, cool. If you want, email it. We'll get it sent out to you, man, as soon as possible. They're really freaking dope.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to you more about that SDK, man. That's so freaking awesome. Sorry to cut you off there.
Oh no, great. I really appreciate all your time, and I'll stick around for wrap-ups. But yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks for coming, brother. Thank you. It's nice to meet you. I'm stoked.
It was nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Rocky Mountain High. You made me high, brother. Thank you. Thank you, In and Out. Thank you, Trisha.
You good, guys.
Let's stay in touch, okay? Let's stay in touch. If you're not on the in the box chat, in our Discord, jump on.
Yeah, come to the Discord.
And we can
get like a bunch of good people out there, right?
Continue. Let's shoot for this time next week. 2 hours ago. This time next week. Let's see if it unfolds. It's not up to us, but we can have that intention, right?
Yeah, I'm with it. Let's explore it. Let's spend this week exploring it too.
Let's do it. Let's check in next week.
Time, right?
Let's check it in this week and see if we can not know any more next week.
Know as little as possible tomorrow or next week, guys.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Peace out.
Peace, y'all.